Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be working again with light and trying to figure out light. I'm going to be painting with just pencil and charcoal on the iPad using Procreate. So one of the main things I'm trying to figure out is how to control light and understand light sources, objects, how they hit one another, how they interact with one another, and how to build out like a realistic scene with a bunch of different components. Yesterday, I took a look at just an object with like a step in it and trying to figure out how light would go across it. I didn't really get into much detail beyond that. I just wanted to focus on those points that I wanted to learn. I still have work to do on that, but I'd also wanted to try to build out maybe a little bit more of like a scene. And today what I'm trying to do is have another block. This one doesn't have any steps or anything on it, but have a single light source coming from the top, kind of like a street lamp pointed onto, like a building or something like that. Some type of spotlight that might fan out and figure out where the edges of that light would be and how it would cross over and reflect onto an object on the ground. And a couple things worked, a couple things didn't work. We'll look at what I've done and I'll kind of point out where I think I need to work on improving, and then hopefully focus on that, for some of the next videos. So diving into it right now, I'm trying to figure out, what this light source is that I'm trying to draw. I thought that if I built like a cone, I might be able to kind of make it look like a lamp or something like that, some kind of street lamp. I went with that for a little bit, and now I'm just building out the box as I said before. I'm not using a grid. You can use a grid. There's no reason not to use to not use a grid. I just find it's a little bit clunky to work with a grid, and I kind of find it can be somewhat cumbersome when I'm just trying to block out something. And I also want to get better. Just a lot of this is just line movements, line drawing, and just trying to feel confident in the strokes that I make on the paper, and making sure that when I am doing the drawings, one tip is to just use your arm to make these long strokes instead of trying to use your wrist. Wrist is for smaller movements. Longer movements are for when you're trying to do straight lines or particularly curved lines. It's really good to use your whole arm for longer movements. So what I'm doing right here is drawing out where the light goes from the light source, and then trying to figure out how it will traverse over the object, because there's an object in the way of its path. So what I'm doing is seeing where the intersection is from every point, and then running the line up from where it is to to the object and then across, because that distance will change. So as the light moves up on the object, it's going to cut across differently. Now, this is more just practice. The light itself won't really change in my drawing at these particular points. I just kind of wanted to practice at different angles what this might end up looking like. So I don't know. I did get rid of the little cone lamp thing. It's still kind of active in my mind. I'm still kind of keeping that in mind, but I thought the cone was too limiting. It was kind of confusing me when I was trying to do the drawing. Now I'm looking at this and I don't necessarily like the shape of the object that I've put up there. It's kind of like big perspective. This would have to be like a really huge object to get that kind of perspective change. But yeah, again, all of this is just getting the right lines drawn down on the piece of paper. And this is where it's kind of important to be able to do some freehand stuff, is when you have things that aren't aligned with the grid. You need to draw lines that aren't aligned with the grid. You still need to have that fluid motion, and it can be difficult. I mean, you can use a ruler too and things like that, but I just feel like I want to be able to be confident there. So again, another technique that I use is to zoom out when I'm trying to build an object, and if the line is getting really long. Right now I'm trying to see what the shadow would look like. I've built out where the lines are going to go over, and now I want to build out what the actual shadow is, and I'm organizing this now into layers so that I can kind of get kind of organize everything. Unfortunately, Procreate doesn't have like a full, I didn't see like a full opacity for a specific group, so I had to go and individually lower the opacity of each group just so that I could, kind of make the form, distinguish the form from the light rays that I'm trying to build. So we're going to continue here. I spent a lot of time just figuring out where light is moving and getting these lines correct. A lot of the time you really want the underlying drawing to be, the underlying drawing is supremely important in my opinion, and I think that it informs the painting later on. I like to have an underlying drawing. Right now I'm not good enough to be at a point where I can just kind of draw exactly what I want. I can just paint exactly what I want. I like to have that underlying infrastructure. And a lot of artists do that. Some artists, there's a number of ways to go about it. So now, in the last one, I didn't really do anything outside the object in terms of shadowing. Now I'm trying to think about doing that here. So I take the charcoal pieces and try to do that. But then once I blocked that out, I sort of figured out that I think I missed a couple pieces with a line. I'm trying to understand how this light would shine down and then create an ellipse on the ground. I didn't quite get it, but that's what I'm attempting to do here is figure out where like the cones of intensity would be on the ground for the object. I need to do another painting specifically focused on this without an object, because I figured out that I'm kind of weak here and I don't quite understand what I'm doing. This is a lot of guesswork. I'm trying to build out these sort of light values. I'm trying to build out these light values that fade away, but are still hard cut off by because if this is like a street lamp with cone around it, it should have a hard fall off point, and cut off in a cone, and then there should be no light around it. And that's what I was trying to do here. It didn't end up working so well, and that's what I want to focus on next. Trying to figure out how to draw fall off light from an object that I'm drawing, which is. It's not so much a drawing technique as it is a painting technique, but kind of understanding how to change value in the final painting. And I'm using the same technique that I did last time. Here I'm just kind of blocking out color and erasing. So I draw through the plane and then erase away the edges, and this way you can get a nice smooth texture on the subject. And then erase away the things you don't need. You can also, which is probably better, is you can use like a mask, I believe. I haven't been doing that, but that's another way to do this without having to actually remove paint that you've put onto the canvas. Because if you want to change something like I end up doing, I'll end up having to redraw the entire thing. So the side furthest from the light, I'm making the darkest. And the one closest to the light, trying to make the lightest. Now I've realized that the top one is a little too dark for what it is. I want to use those colors. So what I've done on the far edge on the left is say like that's the edge of the light. It should kind of cut off at the little tip. But I don't want to make that just black, because that doesn't make any sense. And this is where I need to improve, like trying to figure out how that light would show up on the object, where it kind of falls off from the current point, but the object's still there and you should still be able to see the object. It's not pitch black, but what color is it, and how should what should that transition look like? That's what I spent the rest of my time trying to figure out here. Using layers liberally, I like to make sure that I've organized each one of these into separate pieces so that I can erase away and not erase away something that I've already done. That's one benefit to doing digital drawing. So you should really, if you're doing digital, you should use your tools at hand to speed up your process and make things a little easier for you. So now I put in that same thing on the right, but it doesn't really look quite right, and I end up going back and working on it. But right now I'm trying to figure out, how do I inform the space so that the light is not, just black or white? There should be values in between from where the light ends and like where it ends up, becoming just black, and where no light would be showing. I'm trying to figure that out. It's not. It was more difficult than I imagined, than I thought it was going to be. And I spent quite a bit of time just, painting one color on and another color on and kind of back and forth, trying to figure out what the space would look like. Right here, I zoomed out and I was toggling on and off to see if I liked it, liked what I had done. That's another benefit to layers, is you can just toggle them on and off to see if you like or don't like it. So looking at it, it's on the right, it's just way too dark. It doesn't really make sense. That color on the top is way too dark as well, so I'm going to repaint a little bit of that as well. Cutting off, so I've decided to make the center lighter, and then that next color just a little bit lighter than that, and then I'm going to change the top so it should be a little bit darker than the color next to it. And it's all about playing with value and figuring out what looks correct. This one looks a little better here than it did originally, so I decided to leave it. But this is the area where I want to improve. And now I'm trying to paint back in some darkness because I thought it was a little bit too bright. The fall off was a little bit too much for like a coned type of light. And then I just finally said, okay, let's take a look at what this looks like if I paint in the shadow as well. Maybe that's what's making the object not feel quite right to me. And that's what I'm doing here. And again, I draw through the form and then erase away. I could have brought this to the front, the layer holding that paint, and not have had to erase it away, but that's something I could have done. So it gave it a little bit more weight when I did that. I can see I kind of like how that looks right now. It still doesn't quite make sense, but I can kind of get this feel of like this bright light being put on this object and then it kind of fading away. So I thought, I would just be more painterly about it, and I would, just try to put some color on and then see what happens if I cut that off. If I really just tried to hide that piece away. Does that make sense? It's just a back and forth game right now. There's a couple chapters in the book that I'm reading that I think goes over this, and I'm going to take a look at them now and maybe go on from there. But that's the end of the drawing. That's the end of what I have. I'm not too happy with the right side. The left side is pretty good, I think. Makes sense. The right side, I think it still needs work, and I still need to understand what I'm trying to do there. Alright, so yeah, not all paintings go the way you want them to go. This one didn't quite go as well as I had hoped it would, but it's a new problem for me. Something that I haven't figured out exactly how to do. So, I'm just going to keep sticking with it. I'm going to drill down to the skills that I think I need to develop, which is understanding light fall off and different values of light. Now I kind of understand how rays move and how to draw them and where they're going to land. I still need to look at a little more complex situations, but understanding now how light falls off from the point where it kind of ends, and how you can build different types of light with that, be it sunlight, spotlights, diffuse lights, things like that. There are all these different types of light when you try to break it down and look at it in detail. So I think that's what I'm going to work on. Maybe that's what I'll film my next video on. But thanks for tuning in.